Welcome to the party. You found the Mouse Castle Lounge, the place to be for good times and great conversations from the world of Disney. The bar is open, your table is waiting, and drinks are now being served. Come on in. And now, here's your host, the keeper of the Mouse Castle Lounge, Tim Calloway.
Welcome to the lounge. It's February 21st, 2016, and I'm Tim Calloway. We have got a terrific show for you today. My guest is documentary filmmaker Pamela Tom. She's the writer, director, and producer of Tyrus, the story of Chinese-American artist and Disney legend Tyrus Wong. But first, learn the fine art of following the Mouse Castle by liking us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mouse Castle. On Twitter, I am Disney Tim, and the Mouse Castle is also on Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. Share your questions and comments by emailing us at podcast@themousecastle.com or call our listener line at 702-475-5MCL. That's 702-475-5625. And of course, you can always visit the blog at themousecastle.com, where you can download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app for your mobile device. Just click the pic that says, Get the app. Tyrus Wong is a Disney legend. Though his time at the Disney Studios was brief, only 3 years from 1938 to 1941, his contributions there were profound. It was Tyrus's artistic vision that gave Disney's Bambi its lush, impressionistic forest backgrounds, a look that still influences and inspires artists and animators nearly 75 years after the film's release. Tyrus's work on Bambi represents only a small portion of his life's prolific artistic output. Tyrus was part of the Orientalist art movement popular in the U.S. in the 1930s. After leaving Disney, Tyrus would spend over 25 years at Warner Brothers as a production illustrator and concept artist on such films as The Sands of Iwo Jima, Rebel Without a Cause, Harper, and The Wild Bunch. He designed menus for restaurants and greeting cards for Hallmark. Today, at 105 years old, he still creates art, most notably ornate kites that he flies once a month on the beach at Santa Monica. 2.5 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with Tyrus Wong for an episode of the Mouse Castle Lounge. We were at the opening of an art exhibition at the Walt Disney Family Museum, Water to Paper, Paint to Sky, that celebrated Tyrus's life's work. Our interview remains one of my all-time favorites, as I was charmed by the man's modesty, good humor, and immense talent. It was also at this exhibition where I first met filmmaker Pamela Tom, who was in the middle of shooting a documentary about Tyrus. Today, that film is complete, and Pamela is my guest. Her film, appropriately titled Tyrus, is a moving and inspiring story of a man who overcame the hardships of poverty and racism to succeed as both a popular and fine artist. Completing this film has been a labor of love for Pamela as she met Tyrus and conducted her first interview with him over 15 years ago. Pamela is an award-winning producer and director who's been involved with numerous film projects on PBS, including World War II Behind Closed Doors, Wired Science, and the short film Two Lies. She's a respected educator who has taught at UC Santa Barbara, Loyola Marymount, and UCLA Extension. Please welcome Pamela Tom, my guest today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. It's my pleasure to welcome to the lounge today filmmaker Pamela Tom. How are you doing today, Pamela?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Tyrus Wong, he's a remarkable man, a remarkable artist, and someone that you've worked a very long time with to tell his story. Now, how did you first come to know Tyrus and decide to make a film about him?
Okay, well, when my daughter was about 4 or 5 years old, we were watching Bambi. And back then it was on VHS. And
I still have all my VHS tapes, just saying.
Yeah, I haven't let go of that one. So anyway, we were watching the film. I hadn't seen it since I was young, like a young child. And, when you have children, you kind of revisit all those classics that you grew up with. So we were watching the film, and at the end of the film, they had this little making of that they, tack on to the films. And I can't remember which of the animators it was, but it was either Frank Thomas or Mark Davis. One of them was referring to this Chinese-American artist who created the look of Bambi and who's instrumental in creating the look, and, mentioned that his name was Tyrus Wong. And I thought, what? Tyrus Wong, a Chinese person working at Disney in the 1930s who was responsible for creating this gorgeous looking film. So I just decided to go out and try to find out if he was still around, if he was alive, where he was living. And lo and behold, he was alive. He was in his late 80s at the time and living in Sunland, where he had been since 1950.
And once you discovered him, so to speak, where did it go from there?
When I found out he was still living in Los Angeles, I contacted him and invited him to have lunch with me at my brother's Chinese restaurant in downtown LA. And, he was very kind enough to meet with me. And at that time, all I knew about him was that he had worked on Bambi, and that's all I knew about him. So we sat down, had lunch, and by the end of lunch, I had discovered these amazing things about him. It was like this onion, it was just like peeling off just layer after layer. And, that he had worked at Warner Brothers as a production illustrator for over 26 years, worked on Rebel Without a Cause and The Wild Bunch, and that he was a fine artist, and he had been a WPA Depression era painter. And anyway, it was just on and on. And so by the end of lunch, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to make a film about you. Please let me tell your story. And he was very kind, very humble, but, said, sure. That's how it all started.
And just like that. But that was a long time ago, and it has taken you a while to bring your film to completion where it is now. Talk about that process a little bit, where I guess you just kind of had to do it a little bit at a time over years as time and money allowed.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as a lot of independent filmmakers know, especially documentary filmmakers know, the funds are not that easily available. And the advice that I'd gotten at the time was, look, he's in his late 80s. You better get him in the can right now. So just by hook or by crook, just do his interviews. The rest can come later. So I just cobbled together whatever I could and just started shooting his interviews. And that was really such wise advice, because he's so clear, he's, so articulate, and it's just very vibrant. And because when people hear, oh my gosh, he's 100 and what years old and how is he on camera? I said, oh, he's great. And so I was really glad I did that. And so that was the beginning of my journey making this his story, is I just did all his interviews first. And then over the years, I would raise money and then shoot some more and then raise more money and then shoot some more, until I finally decided, I have to finish this film. So I actually quit my job and just devoted myself full time to finishing the film.
Along the way, you've gotten support, whether through research and information or through finance. Talk a little bit about working with Disney or the Walt Disney Family Museum to help bring the movie to life.
My producer and I at the time, we realized that having a good relationship with Disney was really, really important. One, because they were honoring him and recognizing his work. And two, he's best known for his work at Disney on Bambi, of course. And we knew that there were a lot of very enthusiastic people in the animation world who knew who he was and really, admired his work. So we knew we had a core audience right there, a core group of supporters. So I held a fundraiser and invited as many of the Disney people as we knew, as well as the Chinese American community. And that was really my first big fundraiser, and it was very successful. And then after that, Tamara Califf, who works at Disney in the Animation Research Library and who started off as a co-producer and then, got bumped up to a producer, she and I approached the Disney Foundation, the Disney Studio Foundation, for their support and showed them, it was sort of an extended trailer at the time. And they were really supportive and, ended up putting in some money for the film. So that was super helpful. And then the Walt Disney Family Museum came really much later when they did an exhibition of his film. We went up and they were very kind to let us shoot the show and shoot Tyrus there. So it was, you'll see in the film that it's one of the final scenes in the film.
And if I can throw in a full disclosure here, I am actually in the movie because I was there when you were, and this is where we met. It was at the opening of the Tyrus Wong exhibit, which was Water to Paper, Paint to Sky. And that was like fall of 2013 or something like that. And when people get to see this movie, if you look very closely near the end of the film, when you show your footage at the Walt Disney Family Museum, I am on screen for 2 seconds. It's awesome. I think I play like the journalist on the left is actually how I'm credited in the film. Yeah.
That's right.
So, and you touched on this already. So much of Tyrus's work, to most people, and certainly to Disney fans, they are very much aware of his incredible art design and background work on Bambi, but you kind of touched on it already. his career and his life was so much more than that. What were some of the other highlights? Obviously, he spent a number of years doing work at Warner Brothers, but especially as a young artist before he joined Disney, what was that like for him?
Tyrus was very fortunate to have received a scholarship to art school, and that was back in the late 1920s. And he graduated really in the depth of the Depression. And you can imagine trying to launch your career as a fine artist, as a Chinese immigrant living in, a ghetto practically. He lived in Chinatown above a brothel with his father and several other men. He actually received a lot of recognition for his work as a fine artist. He was exhibiting. One of his first shows was at the Chicago Art Institute. It was a group show, and among the other artists, there was Picasso, Matisse, Kandinsky. It was amazing. So here at the age of 21, 22 years old, he was showing in these amazing shows, and his work was shown at the Paris Expo and the New York World's Fair. And then he got married and had a child, had a baby. And, you'll hear him in the film say, well, when you get married, you got to support your wife. So that was when he decided to get a real job. And that real job led him to Disney and his work on Bambi. But as you said, although he's most famous for that work, it really represents such a small slice of his artistic career, because I don't want to give away the entire story, but, he was there for only that film. And after that, it was encouraged to apply for a job at Warner Brothers as a live action pre-production illustrator, which is essentially taking the script and creating large scale concept paintings of what the film would look like, setting the angles, the furniture, the props. So he was one of the first people to take a visual stab, so to speak, at a movie's treatment.
And his story isn't just about a man and his art. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it, but it's also about overcoming hardship, most notably how he was able to succeed in the face of some very harsh discrimination and racism. What was it that he had to deal with as a Chinese immigrant?
Wow. Well, starting with his arrival in America, it was that would have been 1919. And at the time, the Chinese exclusion law was in effect, which barred all immigrants from China, with the exception of merchant, diplomat, missionary, and student. And the only sort of category you could possibly fake was a merchant. So Tyrus came over, and he came under with some false papers. They were called paper sons, and these were papers that you could purchase, and you had to memorize all the details of this false identity. So he was detained at Angel Island. Angel Island was set up specifically to interrogate you and kind of trip you up, so that you could be sent back, tricked, and then deported and sent immediately back to China. But Tyrus was a very smart kid, and kind of figured out the system, and he was able to pass the test and enter the country. So after that, he dealt with a lot of, it's not just racism, but poverty. I mean, he was very, very poor, struggled a lot. And once he got into the studio system, Tyrus doesn't like to dwell on the racism, but if you get him going, he will share stories. And I would say that he had an overall very positive experience at Disney, but, it was at Republic Pictures where they did a lot of kind of John Wayne films and B movies where he experienced the most blatant form of racism, being called a chink and given a really hard time there.
And he overcame it. And at 105 years old, he's still making art, still flying kites in Santa Monica.
That's correct. Can I just say a thing about his kites?
Please do.
His kites are incredible. If you have the chance to see them, if you're ever in Santa Monica on the fourth Saturday of every month, you have to come out. Tyrus brings out all his kites that he's been working on probably since the 80s, early 80s. And they're these just menageries of animals. Like
we're not talking a couple of sticks and a piece of paper here, are we?
Not by any means. These are like 100-foot centipedes. These are flocks of swallows and butterflies and cranes and panda bears, and they're just a marvel to see. And these are kites that he has designed, built, painted, and flies. So they're these engineering feats.
You saw your film, Tyrus, premiere last September at the Telluride Film Festival. What kind of an honor and experience was that for you?
Well, it was indescribable, because Telluride was my dream film festival. I had heard a lot about it. It's this kind of very small boutique, not small, I shouldn't say it's small, but it's, it's only 4 days as opposed to 10 days. And, they're known for the quality of films that they select. And, it's just a very prestigious, very highly respected film festival. And so that was always my goal, was Telluride. So, when we got word that it was accepted, I, just jumped for joy. Of course, the film wasn't finished yet, and I still didn't have enough money. So everything, we just kind of went into overdrive and just managed to finish the film without end credits. And, it was kind of surreal going up there. It's at 9,000 or 8 or 9,000 feet above sea level. And, just to be in that setting. And, it was showed in a program called The Backlot. And it's a special sidebar that focuses on films about art and film. So how perfect is that?
And how was that received by the crowd?
It was received really well. In fact, they had programmed it for 3 different times, and they added 2 additional screenings, which was quite an honor, So, and they don't do that unless they know or hear that people want to see it. So, anyway, I was so excited. So we had 5 screenings in 4 days at Telluride.
Amazing. Now, before we recorded this, you had told me a story about hobnobbing with other filmmakers, and you got the opportunity to meet one of your idols in some rather unique circumstances.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. The first night that you're there, it was a filmmaker reception, so it's a very, very small private reception in a private home, and that was Thursday night. So I arrived, I don't know, at like 4, got lost on the way to Telluride, went in the opposite direction. Anyway, so I ended up arriving like probably 10 minutes after this reception started, and, out of breath, lost. So I kind of like finally arrived, get in there, and the first 2 people I see are Ken Burns talking to Meryl Streep. And I was just like, okay.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. And, you're already like oxygen deprived. So you kind of think everything's sort of surreal to begin with. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm just dreaming. So I went there and I thought, okay, I can't go up to Meryl Streep. There's no way, but I could probably go up to Ken Burns and be okay. So I waited until they finished their conversation. She left. And then I just went up to him and, told him what a big fan I was of his work, and that I had a documentary in the festival. And from that point on, he's like, call me Ken. And he was just very, very nice, very encouraging, very, just very welcoming. And the rest was just all great. What can I say? It was a perfect way to start the film festival.
Nice. That is a great way to kick it off. Now, Tyrus is making the rounds on the film festival circuit. As a matter of fact, coming up in March at CamFest, which is a film festival put on by the Center for Asian American Media in San Francisco, Tyrus is opening the festival.
That's right.
What kind of an honor is that for you?
It's an incredible honor because their opening night film screens at the historic Castro Theater, which is in the Mission District, and it's a 1,400-seat theater. And I'm just thrilled to open a festival. I mean, it just speaks so much to their support of the film and their excitement over it. And one of the journalists at the press conference asked them, how do you choose the opening night film? And they said, well, we pick a film that we feel could generate enough excitement to really set the tone for the next 10 days. And they said that they knew really early on that this was going to be their opening night film. So it was quite an honor, and they showed it at the press conference, and, there was just a lot of great buzz and reception by the journalists. So I think everybody's really looking forward to and anticipating a pretty exciting night. Tyrus will be there himself. It's being co-presented by Pixar and the Walt Disney Family Museum. So it's bringing all the different parties together under one big exciting roof.
And if people want to find out more about the film festival, they can go to camfest.com. That's CAAMFEST.com. Tickets are still available. So if you're in the Bay Area and would like to see that on March 10th, I recommend it because thanks to you, Pamela, I got to get a look at Tyrus, which is just a remarkable film. It is moving, it is inspiring, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now, I'm guessing Tyrus has seen the movie, correct?
Yes, he has. He saw it down in San Diego, and then he saw it in LA. Yes, at a private screening, actually like a semi-private screening in LA. Yes.
How did he feel about seeing himself on screen like that?
I think it's, I'm trying to put myself in his shoes. Like, what is it like to sit in a dark theater and watch your entire life unfold on screen? Apparently, he really, really liked it a lot. And I know his family really loved it. So, Tyrus isn't very analytical. He's not a film critic or anything like that. But he just came up to me and he just kind of gave me a hug and just said, "You did a great job." So I was like, that was all I needed to hear.
That's probably the best review you could ever hope to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it that impresses you, or what is it that you admire most about Tyrus?
Wow. I would have to say his ability to stay positive and maintain a sense of humor in the face of such hardship and discrimination. Yeah, I think that's it. It's his character, really. I mean, his art I love. I will always love his art, and I will always admire him for the beauty that he's brought into this world and just the sheer amount of work that he's done. But really, this is a man who's a survivor and has come through with such grace and humor and humanity, and I just love that about him.
Well, Tyrus, again, making the film festival circuit, working on distribution, hopefully to bring it into more theaters by the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
And I'm sure there's a lot about that you can't talk about yet, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to see more of it very soon. Now, if people want to, support your film, you do have a website. Where can they find out more about it?
Yes, they can go to tyrusthemovie.com. And you could sign up to receive newsletters. There's a little donate button. This is all, we're doing self-distribution at this point, and I have a lot of marketing costs and publicity and outreach costs. So if people want to make a tax-deductible donation, I have a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. They can do that as well. They can also go to our Facebook page, Tyrus, a documentary film, and, like us on Facebook. That would be great. And just kind of spread the word, let people know that this film is out there making the rounds in film festivals. And if you go to our website page, there's a screenings tab, and we update that regularly whenever we have a screening in a different city. So just check it out. Oh, and one thing about the CamFest, this is for your listeners. I'd love to share a discount code with them if they're interested. Ooh. And that is CAMTYRUS, CAAMTYRUS. And if they enter that, they get $15 off the admission for the screening and the gala.
Fantastic. Well, Pamela, this has been an absolute pleasure. Tyrus, again, a wonderful film. I can't wait for more people to be able to see it. I haven't spent near as much time with him as you have, but I had the honor of meeting Tyrus Wong a couple of years ago. And just what a charming, gracious, and wonderful man. So, I mean, this is a story that really begged to be told, and I'm so glad that you were able to bring it to life. And thank you very much for spending time with us today in the Mouse Castle Lounge.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim, for this chance to talk about the film. I really appreciate it.
And that will do it for this edition of the Mouse Castle Lounge. Thank you to Pamela Tom for being my guest. Stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. You can also download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app, which you can get right now by going to themousecastle.com and clicking Get the App. Anthony Reynolds and I host Inside the Mouse Castle with your weekly dose of Disney news, information, and commentary. Do give us a listen. The Mouse Castle Lounge is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. I just like to talk about them. I'm Tim Calloway. It's been a blast as always, so let's do this again real soon. Take care.